Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Michelle, and I'm coming to you from 1973. And that's right, 1973. That is when Roe v. Wade, a landmark court case, was decided by the Supreme Court, 1973. Now, we're in 2022, but we're really back in 1973. So, sit back and what do you expect from a 50-year-old TV set? In 1550 BCE in Egypt, the first documented induced abortion is recorded on the Ebers Papyrus. And for those of you that don't know what the Ebers Papyrus was, it was actually a 110-page scroll that ancient Egyptians documented their medicinal recipes. And this date is very significant because that was 1550 BCE, meaning before the Common Era, or before the birth of Jesus. Now we move into the early 1600s through the early 19th century, where abortions were frequently practiced in North America by tribal communities. It would not be until 1860 that we would begin seeing laws passed in the colonies outlawing abortion.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
On June the 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, ending 50 years of federal abortion rights by a 5-4 decision.
Today is it's not hyperbole to suggest a very solemn moment. Today, the Supreme Court of the United States expressly took away a constitutional right from the American people that it had already recognized. They didn't limit it, they simply took it away. That's never been done to a right so important to so many Americans, but they did it. It's a sad day for the court and for the country. 50 years ago, Roe v. Wade was decided and has been the law of the land since then. This landmark case protected a woman's right to choose, her right to make intensely personal decisions with her doctor, free from the interference of politics. It reaffirmed basic principles of equality, that women have the power to control their own destiny, and it reinforced a fundamental right of privacy, a right of each of us to choose how to live our lives. Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk. As chairman and ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, as vice president and now as president of the United States, I've studied this case carefully. I've overseen more Supreme Court confirmations than anyone today, where this case was always discussed. I believe Roe v. Wade was the correct decision as a matter of constitutional law and application of the fundamental right to privacy and liberty in matters of family and personal autonomy. It was a decision on a complex matter that drew a careful balance between a woman's right to choose earlier in her pregnancy and the state's ability to regulate later in her pregnancy. A decision with broad national consensus that most Americans of faith and backgrounds found acceptable, and that have been the law of the land for most of the lifetime of Americans today. and it was a constitutional principle upheld by justices appointed by Democrat and Republican presidents alike. Roe v. Wade was a 7-2 decision, written by a justice appointed by a Republican president, Richard Nixon. In the 5 decades that followed Roe v. Wade, justices appointed by Republican presidents from Eisenhower, Nixon, and Reagan, George W. Bush, were among the justices who voted to uphold the principles set forth in Roe v. Wade. It was 3 justices named by one president, Donald Trump, who were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country. Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law. It's a realization of an extreme ideology and a tragic error by the Supreme Court, in my view. The court has done what it has never done before, expressly take away a constitutional right that is so fundamental to so many Americans that had already been recognized. The court's decision to do so will have real and immediate consequences. State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, some without exceptions. So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls were forced to bear their rapist's child. With the child a consequence. It just stuns me. So extreme that doctors will be criminalized for fulfilling their duty to care. Imagine having a young woman have to carry the child of incest as a consequence of incest. No option. Too often the case. The poor women are going to be hit the hardest. It's cruel. In fact, the court laid out state laws criminalizing abortion that go back to the 1800s as rationale. The court literally taking America back 150 years. This is a sad day for the country, in my view. But it doesn't mean the fight's over. Let me be very clear and unambiguous. The only way we can secure a woman's right to choose, and the balance that existed, is for Congress to restore the protections of Roe v. Wade as federal law. No executive action from the president can do that. And if Congress, as it appears, lacks the votes to do that now, voters need to make their voices heard. This fall, we must elect more senators and representatives who will codify women's right to choose into federal law once again. Elect more state leaders to protect this right at the local level. We need to restore the protections of Roe as law of the land. We need to elect officials who will do that. This fall, Roe is on the ballot. Personal freedoms are on the ballot. The right to privacy, liberty, equality, they're all on the ballot. Until then, I will do all in my power to protect a woman's right in states where they will face the consequences of today's decision. While the court's decision cast a dark shadow over a large swath of the land, many states in this country still recognize a woman's right to choose. So, if a woman lives in a state that restricts abortion, the Supreme Court's decision does not prevent her from traveling from her home state to the state that allows it. It does not prevent a doctor in that state from treating her. As the Attorney General has made clear, women must remain free to travel safely to another state to seek care they need. My administration will defend that bedrock right. If any state or local official, high or low, tries to interfere with a woman's exercising her basic right to travel, I will do everything in my power to fight that deeply un-American attack. My administration will also protect a woman's access to medications that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, like contraception, which is essential for preventative health care, mifepristone, which the FDA approved 20 years ago to safely end early pregnancies and is commonly used to treat miscarriages. Some states are saying that they'll try to ban or severely restrict access to these medications. But extremist governors and state legislators are looking to block the mail or search a person's medicine cabinet or control a woman's actions by tracking data on her apps she uses are wrong and extreme and out of touch with the majority of Americans. The American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists wrote to me and Vice President Harris stressing that these laws are not based on evidence and asking us to act to protect access to care. They say by limiting access to these medicines, maternal mortality will climb in America. That's what they say. Today, I'm directing the Department of Health and Human Services to take steps to ensure these critical medications are available to the fullest extent possible. And the politicians cannot interfere in the decisions that should be made between a woman and her doctor. And my administration will remain vigilant as the implications of this decision play out. I've warned about how this decision risks the broader right to privacy for everyone. That's because Roe recognized the fundamental right to privacy that has served as a basis for so many more rights that we've come to take for granted, that are ingrained in the fabric of this country. The right to make the best decisions for your health. The right to use birth control, a married couple in the privacy of their bedroom, for God's sake. The right to marry the person you love. Now, Justice Thomas said as much today. He explicitly called to reconsider the right of marriage equality, the right of couples to make their choices on contraception. This is extreme and dangerous path the court is now taking us on. Let me close with 2 points. First, I call on everyone, no matter how deeply they care about this decision, to keep all protests peaceful. Peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. No intimidation. Violence is never acceptable. Threats and intimidation are not speech. We must stand against violence in any form, regardless of your rationale. Second, I know so many of us are frustrated and disillusioned that the court has taken something away that's so fundamental. I know so many women are now going to face incredibly difficult situations. I hear you. I support you. I stand with you. The consequences and the consensus of the American people, core principles of equality, liberty, dignity, and the stability of the rule of law demand that Roe should not have been overturned. With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country. They've made the United States an outlier among developed nations in the world. But this decision must not be the final word. My administration will use all of its appropriate lawful powers, but Congress must act. And with your vote, you can act. You can have the final word. This is not over. Thank you very much. More to say this in weeks to come. Thank you.
Yes, the Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade in a 5-4 decision. In 1985, 56% of the American people had confidence in the Supreme Court. By 2022, that confidence level had dropped to 25%. Since 1973, more than 60 million legal abortions have occurred in the United States. And just so we put that number in context, as of 2019, there were 41.2 million African Americans living in the United States. Black women were more than 3.6 times more likely to have an abortion than white women. The abortion rate of women with Medicaid coverage is 3 times as high as that of other women. No matter what your politics or beliefs, Black indigent women will be impacted the most. 30% of aborting women identified as Protestant, 24% identified as Catholic. Research shows us that the majority of people who obtain an abortion have a religious affiliation. For the period 1986 through 2019, the abortion rate in the United States decreased by over 50%. So the question we now ask ourselves is, who is getting abortions in the United States? We see that the majority of women between the ages of 20 and 29 are getting abortions in the U.S. On this chart, you'll see that 42.9% of abortions occur at less than or equal to 6 weeks. And this certainly will cause angst for physicians, because what happens if you do an abortion at 6 weeks and 5 days? Will you be subject to prosecution? Another interesting statistic is that those individuals that are choosing to get abortions, 59.8% have at least one live birth. We also see that in terms of previously induced abortions, in 2019, approximately 41.8% of the abortions that occurred that had not been their first induced abortion.
I had an abortion. Or maybe I didn't. Why do you care? That's the shame cycle. Shame equals silence equals ignorance. But before I can tell you and will tell you about that silence and that ignorance and how it hurts women, I want to tell you one thing that shame doesn't do. Shame does not stop women having abortions. Now, the data on this is not great, and I'm a researcher, so I care about this kind of stuff. And it's not great because it's difficult data to get and because abortion is stigmatized, and so the research funding isn't there. But from what we can tell, shame does not stop many, if any, women from having abortions. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt women. It does, and it hurts them by silencing them and by causing ignorance. So let's talk about that. Silent women can't ask for support. 2/3 of women fear that if others find out about their abortion, they will look down on them. And so, nearly that number, 58 to 60%, don't tell their friends and their family about their abortion and talk about their abortion little or not at all. Silent women can't share information. So if I reach out to someone and say, oh my God, I'm pregnant when I don't want to be, I don't know what to do, and someone says to me, oh, you know, that's terrible, like that happened to me too, and here's how I felt, and here's how it went, and I went to this clinic and it was terrific, or I went to that one and it wasn't so good. But whatever you do, if you go to this one, be really careful, because across the street there's a building that's dolled up to look like the abortion clinic, but it's actually not an abortion clinic at all. It's run by a pro-life agency. And by the time you even work out where you are, they will have told you a whole bunch of false information about abortion. They may have told you you're going to hell. And by the time you stumble out of there, you'll have missed your appointment. Silent women don't ask for the laws they need and deserve. And indeed, this was actually how I came into the shame issue, because I am an abortion rights activist. And in order to change the laws, to try to get things out of the law that hurt women, to try to put things into the law that protect women, I actually need to raise awareness amongst decision makers and amongst the public that there is a problem. So if you think about any news item that you've ever seen, or a newspaper article about some broad social issue, you'll see that it starts with a story. It starts with a story of a particular person. And that's so that it doesn't seem so abstract, and you can actually see that this broad social issue that's being spoken about is actually hurting someone. And that's why it is we need to make the effort to change things. But if I can't get women to tell their stories, I can't get things in the media. Or if I do get them in the media, I get them buried at the back of the news bulletin or the back of the paper where they have less influence. I couldn't even get women to come to Canberra and talk to politicians. And that means it's really hard for me to make some of the changes that I want to make. So you've got to ask yourself, if shame is so bad for women, then why is it still happening, and who is doing it? Well, the answer to who's doing it is the shame stokers. And the reason is that shame is a gift that just keeps on giving. Shame equals silence, equals ignorance, equals shame, equals silence, equals more ignorance, equals more shame, and more silence, and more ignorance. And that silence and that ignorance is the fertilizer for the ground on which repressive abortion laws and policies flourish. And our final shame-stoking is abortion is a worse moral scandal than priests sexually abusing young people. This was said by a Catholic archbishop, again not long ago, to a group of young people. And I just want to stop for a minute on this one and just underscore what is really being said here. So what is being said is the moral evil that we need to concern ourselves about is not men in positions of authority and trust who rape children and or then cover it up. The real moral problem of our time is women who have abortions. So there's a couple of messages that the shame stokers are sending us there. One message is direct to women who've had abortions. So what they're worried about is if they talk about their abortion, they'll be shamed and judged and cast out. And the shame stokers are saying to them, you bet your life you will. You put your head above the parapet, Missy, and we will kick you in the teeth. And the second message the shame stokers are sending is to all of us. And it's really a lesson worth learning. And it is this, that if you don't tell your own story, other people will tell that story for you. Silence does not stay silent for long. So, this is an optimistic challenge, right? And I've just dragged you right down into the mud. But do not worry, because we are heading up. And the reason we are heading up is because there is absolutely nothing that I have just told you that you cannot do something about. You bet. You bet. Communities cause shame, and communities can stop it. So let's talk about what you can do. Reach out. Women who've had abortions who feel supported experience less shame and less of shame's noxious downstream consequences. So let the women in your world know that you are not a shame stoker. That if they talk to you about a problem pregnancy or an abortion, you will not judge them. You will not shame them, but you will listen with empathy and compassion and let them know they're not alone. I in no way mean to disrespect the person who said this, okay? He said he was one of the first people to speak out against the Nazis and he deserves heaps of respect. But I put it up there because the truth is that I don't really like it. And I don't really like it because even though it's true, even though it is true that one of the reasons we act morally is because we're worried that if we don't stand up for people, women who have abortions say, that women who have abortions won't stand up for us. That is true. But I'm looking for something morally much bigger than that. I'm looking for something more Lady Diana, who in the midst of the AIDS crisis, when people were seeking to shun and stigmatize and judge and cast out anybody who was thought to have the virus and gay men, she started reaching out her hand to touch those people and to shake their hands. I'm looking for something more like the King of Denmark, who the apocryphal story goes, when the Nazis came into Denmark and said, you have to brand all your Jews with a star, he said, well, fine. But if that's going to happen, I'm going to wear a star too, and so is every Dane. I'm looking for people who want to say, not by my hand, not on my watch, because I am the strong one. And standing up for women and against abortion shame, it is just the right thing to do. So, I had an abortion. Or maybe I didn't. But I hope by now you know that it doesn't matter either way, because we won't be silent anymore.
It is estimated that a complete recriminalization of abortion would result in perhaps as many as 440,000 additional births per year.